actually goes to him. But I would like to thank you all, in particular you, Kristen. There's nothing quite like hearing about from lived experience to ground our reflections. Mr. Fessenmeyer, if I'm pronouncing your name right, thank you very much for being here. I'd like to ask you a question about cannabis being a gateway drug. You have published a report, Smart Approaches to Marijuana, where you make the conclusion that marijuana use could double opioid use. So your study cites a direct link between cannabis and as a gateway drug to other drugs. Before you answer the question, I should tell you that we've asked this question to other scientists as well. So we asked Dr. LaFall, who's the medical head of the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, widely reputed to be a leading scientific organization, who said that there is no direct evidence concerning consumption of cannabis as a gateway. We asked Dr. Jenkins, who was here just before you, again, no evidence. Toronto Public Health, who came before us, I think last week, made the same conclusion, that there was no direct evidence. Could you clarify this confusion for us, based on what your findings are and what your studies are, and what do they conclusively prove?
I don't have that specific study in front of me, but to pull from personal experience, I've just recently, these last few years, come out of high school, and most people I know that have had experience with marijuana do move on to other drugs, even if it's just a trier or they try something laced in with it, but it is definitely a starting point. Now, it's really hard to kind of gauge it as a gateway drug and really call it that way. It really depends on the person itself, but I'd say it's enough to really point out that there's enough people to point that they always want to move on to something. Look at cocaine users. They actually had a study on this for a while back. I'm not exactly sure the exact study, but what it did point out was that almost every single user had a history of marijuana use. So it doesn't necessarily state that marijuana is a gateway drug, but there's a correlation there. We haven't really found that out scientifically yet, but I know that's definitely enough evidence for me to point there's more to research there.
What do you say to all the scientists who we've asked about gateway drug or not, who have concluded there is no direct causal relationship?
Honestly, I think it's irrelevant. We look at it as marijuana is what it is. It's the double 9-tetrahydrocannabinol is the substance you're looking at that's going to cause a high, right? You build up a tolerance to it, and at that point, there's a point where they're constantly merging onto higher potency and higher potency. But if you want to kind of jump to it, I think that's where the point is, where you're moving on to something a little stronger. I had my fiance's brother do the same kind of thing, where he started using marijuana and then just wanted a better high. And you go to that stronger potency, but at that point, if you don't want to keep looking for a stronger potency, you're going to move on to something else. And at that point, it does get harder to find high potency marijuana because it's easier to find the lower stuff. So you're just going to move on to whatever next thing is available.
May I pursue this further?
Yes.
So yes, the evidence that you're citing, it's anecdotal, and we have to weigh the anecdotes against the evidence. The study that you cite in your own research paper concludes with a statement that is not mentioned in your report. It's sort of, when you read the study, it's at the end, and it says, taken together, results suggest that the strength association between cannabis use and other illicit drug use may be driven by individual characteristics, like maybe in the cases you're pointing, rather than being wholly explained by a direct causal relationship. So again, I'm trying to get at the causal relationship between use of cannabis and progressing to harder drugs, or the absence of this evidence, which the scientists suggest to us that there is no evidence that links A with B.
Potentially, I'd say I'm more or less the wrong person to ask. I'm not really a scientist. I pull from all the evidence I gather from the scientists that work with Smart Approach to Marijuana and numerous other studies around us. I haven't done that research myself. I'm only pulling from that. So secondhand knowledge, really, in that specific point. But I'd say that's where I come from, is just you can say it's anecdotal, but I have a majority of my friends and personal acquaintances who've used marijuana in the high school talks I've done. They do talk about always finding a higher potency marijuana, and to me that is the point where they look for something else. And if I've spoken to people before, that's the same thing they kind of bring up to me, that they want something stronger. And it's not hard to think, well, I'm already doing a drug, I can move on to something else. How much worse could it be? That's the whole point you get with marijuana when you get that whole pro-legalization idea, is that it's not that bad. And then when a young person especially gets mixed up in that ideology that it's not that bad, it's not hard to think that something else is not that bad.
Thank you. Senatrice Meji.